Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. On this episode, we've got one preseason game in the books for the Bears. We've got a little bit of Cubs, a little bit of White Sox. All this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. We're inching closer to the start of the season. We're in August already, and it starts in the beginning of October, so we are getting close. So head on over to icehogs.com, pick up a hat, shirt, jersey, season tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, how are you, my friend?
I am doing quite well. How about yourself?
Can't complain. Had a nice weekend. Took the wife and kids today to the Wisconsin State Fair, and
Ooh, that's fun.
yeah, I ate a lot of food.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what you should do at one of those things.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, the thing is, my daughter's about to turn 4 in October, and a bad idea was starting off the morning giving her a cream puff. Because the sugar, she doesn't eat a lot of sugar, and the sugar rush happened instantaneously. And then about an hour later, she was dragging.
Yeah, that sounds like a sugar rush in a kid, all right.
I mean, it got to the point where we left around, well, at around 12:30, there was a sea otter or sea lion show. We saw that, and then that was literally right at the exit, and we parked across the street from the entrance. And we started walking out after that, and she just laid in the grass and was like, I'm too tired to walk. And I had to carry her the rest of the way while she barked orders.
Well, there you go. You lesson learned.
I kind of felt like Luke Skywalker on Dagobah carrying Yoda.
Except she wasn't filling you with Jedi wisdom.
No, she's just barking commands.
Yeah, there you go.
But at least we got a little break on the heat.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday it was weird because I was working at the Arlington racetrack with the Chicago Bandits, and the actual temperature was in the 90s, but it was so windy that you didn't feel the heat.
Sorry, I unplugged my mic there for a second.
Whoops. I was going to say, where'd you go?
Yeah, no, I guess I didn't have it in there very tight. Yeah, but it's how much longer does their season go?
We have 3 more regular season games at the end of this week. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it's off to the championships. And the championships just happen to be hosted at our stadium this year. So it's supposed to be a neutral site, but, you know, I like to think we have a little bit of a home field advantage there.
So are any of the the softball Olympians on that team?
Yeah, there's a lot of Olympians on the team. Jenny Finch was on the Chicago Bandits for a number of years, and we're going to have Jenny Finch Day actually coming up in this last homestand because when it comes to like softball and like big names, Jenny Finch is arguably the biggest name in USA softball.
Yeah, I definitely know that name, but I figure she's got to be fairly old now for an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't play anymore, so, but it's, you know, it's going to be a special day for her. I think they do it every year.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because she was on the Bandits like mid and late 2000s. And, when she played for the Bandits, a lot of people would go out to see her because she's the most marketable softball player still, even though she doesn't play anymore. It's kind of like Michael Jordan. Everyone knows who Michael Jordan is, even though he hasn't played.
It's kind of like Derrick Rose, how in China he's still huge, even though in America he doesn't play.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. And the interesting thing about that you mentioned China is that actually one of the teams is based out of Beijing. They play their regular season here in the States, but they're based out of Beijing. So the league isn't very big. It's only 5 teams, but there's a little bit of diversity. You have a team from Aussie, a team from Beijing, and then you have the other 3 teams that are around here, including Chicago and Cleveland and the USSSA Pride, who will be the other team the Bandits are playing in the championship.
So where do the Australian team and the Chinese team play their home games when they're based here?
I think one is in Missouri and one's in Florida. You'd have to fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's where they play.
Huh. That's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah, it is, because it allows those players to be able to have a team in the National Pro Fast Pitch, and you don't have to commute overseas over the Pacific Ocean to play games.
Yeah, that'll be that's kind of a cool idea. I can't think of any other league that does that.
Yeah, I can't either. So yeah, I mean, the 3 games that are going to be at the end of the season, they're really pretty meaningless because no one's catching the Bandits or the Pride. They're like over 20 games ahead of the other teams. So it's going to be the Bandits and the Pride in the championship series. It's going to be a best of 5 this year, which I guess it's the first time ever they've done that. And yeah, it's going to be hosted by the Bandits this year. So we're pretty lucky with that.
That's cool. So good luck to the Bandits. Yeah, right there,
sure.
Right there in Rosemont. So if
Yep.
if you are listening to this, I was going to say odds are you're local, but looking at the numbers, there's a lot of you that are not. They must be Chicago sports fans that are, relocated. But if you are in the Chicagoland area, head on over there. It's a nice looking stadium. It's right off 294. You can see it.
Yeah, it is. And it's right next to the Chicago Dogs Stadium. So don't get the 2 confused, because that does happen quite often. It's the one down the street from the Chicago Dogs. Yeah, you could get there by taking Manheim and Balmoral. I mean, that's how I get there.
Awesome. So, since we last talked, the Bears have had a preseason game.
Mm-hmm.
They played in the Hall of Fame game, which is the annual game that they play the day before the induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And if anybody has not been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, do it. It's really cool. It's not that big. When you pull up and you are in the parking lot and you look at it and you're like, that's it? It's not that big. But when you walk in, it is so cool. Like Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is massive.
It's a whole village there.
Yeah. And I spent a whole day there, and I feel like I didn't see a fraction of it. The Football Hall of Fame is much smaller, but when you go in, the Bears are so heavily represented in there. It's awesome, because a lot of the things in there are from, back in the Papa Bear Hallis days. So you just have so much representation. And then, the 85 team and Devin Hester's shoes that he wore in the Super Bowl are in there. And there's just so much cool stuff. And now we have the bust of Brian Urlacher.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that Hall of Fame induction, because I did. I wanted to watch him be inducted. I wanted to see what his speech was going to be like. And frankly, I thought he said all the right things in the speech. He talked about how much he appreciated the fans. He talked about how he appreciated his ex-teammates, including Mike Brown. He did that funny imitation. Peanut Tillman, who was there. Lovie Smith was there. He seemed really humbled by everything, very thankful of his family and friends. And to me, it felt like closure, because let's face it, when Urlacher left the league in 2012, it seemed like the relationship between him and the Bears were a little bit rocky. You know, after all those years, it wasn't handled that gracefully, but it seems like everything just kind of came together in a nice, humble end as he was inducted to the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's kind of how I saw it.
I agree with your point. It wasn't a good ending on his part, but the blame goes on both sides.
Right.
Is Brian Urlacher had to realize where he was in his career and for the demands for the salary and the Bears regime that was in the front office at the time did not handle it well and gave him basically a take it or leave it offer. And rather than sit down with him and just sort of discuss where he's at, because Brian Urlacher is a very prideful guy, and you know he loves his teammates, he loves his team, and I just, you know, I can't imagine that that's how he wanted to go out.
No, not at all.
And being a Hall of Famer and, you know, leaving the league as a free agent that nobody wants versus Ray Lewis went out as a Super Bowl champion, there's a big, vast difference there. And I still will say Brian Urlacher was the better linebacker. Ray Lewis was very prototypical for a standard middle linebacker, but Brian Urlacher was he was a game changer. And it's a sad situation that his career ended like that, but it's nice to see that he's moved on and to see how humbled he was by this whole thing. I mean, he had to know he was going into the Hall of Fame, but still, it just, you know, how, you know, he's been known. I love Brian Urlacher, but he's been known to be kind of a lunkhead at times. And that speech was anything but lunkheadedness. And as opposed to, you know, maybe somebody else's speech where he thanked himself.
Yeah, I think he had one of the more better speeches in that whole, you know, induction, because I watched most of them. I heard about the Ray Lewis one. I didn't really watch it, but yeah, absolutely. He handled himself perfectly during that. And, you know, I think having life outside football for him, maybe it kind of made him realize a few things, because when he was playing football, you know, everything was so fierce and competitive with him. It kind of maybe being away from that and focusing on other things made him realize, you know, maybe how to kind of act or talk in certain situations. Urlacher was never a bad guy. He was never, you know, overly awful with people. He was who he is, and he was a fierce competitor, and, you know, he stuck by what he said, and, you know, that's fine. I just think that maybe being away from football has opened up his mind a little bit, and he was able to really present himself incredibly well, not only during the Hall of Fame speech, but really that whole weekend before the Hall of Fame game when he was high-fiving all the Bears. You know, that was a really cool thing to see. And just kind of talking about Brian Urlacher himself, just as a player, there are things, if you just go back and watch his career highlights, whether it's stripping the ball away, interception, making a tackle, whatever, just go back and watch the highlights. There are things that he did that you just can't put on paper in numbers. Look, I'm a huge numbers guy when it comes to certain things in sports, but when it comes to what Brian Urlacher did, sometimes you just got to use the eye test and you realize how good he was. He was a big guy that could move swiftly. You saw the way he moved and the way he would just
as a perfect example of that is watch the game they played against the Atlanta Falcons when Michael Vick was the quarterback. When Michael Vick was like a feared opponent, and Brian Urlacher ran him down. And I mean, literally, Brian Urlacher's twice the size of Michael Vick, and he ran him down like, you know, a cheetah running down a gazelle. Like it was just phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you can't necessarily put those things on paper in numbers. You just got to watch it for yourself. I think one of my favorite Urlacher moments, I don't know if you saw, did you see my Twitter poll about what was his best play? Did you see that?
I did. I didn't see the results, but I saw the poll and I saw the options.
So here are the final results. I'll just read them here. The pick six versus Brett Favre, the strip of James in the 06 comeback versus the Arizona Cardinals, the strip of Amon Green, also against the Packers. That was a really nice play. And as you mentioned, the fumble recovery versus Michael Vick. You could probably guess which one won, if you had a guess.
Oh, well, because it's a Chicago poll, so it's Brett Favre.
Exactly. And you remember that Favre got the snap, he just chucked it, and then the camera panned over to the end zone because it was expected to go to the end zone. Then all of a sudden, Brian Urlacher's just running away with it, and he had nobody in front of him. And Urlacher wasn't even that far from where Favre was. He was kind of charging at him and was maybe a few yards away, just boop, got it, and took off. It was an incredible play.
Yeah, I remember that. I just, it was so surreal is because you're so used to Brett Favre just killing the Bears, and that play happened and you're like, oh my God, yes.
Now, wasn't that game the last start for Brett Favre as a Packer at Soldier Field? I want to say it was.
That I couldn't tell you. It may have been, but
because I thought that was in 2007 when that happened. It wasn't 06 because they lost to the Packers in 06 near the end of the season when it didn't mean anything. At least I think. I thought it was 07.
You're better. Your memory's
because
better than
08 was that's when Rodgers came in.
Then it must have been.
Yeah,
it must have been.
So,
but it was really great to see Urlacher make the Hall of Fame, and I know a lot of people were speculating that he wouldn't go in first ballot, and I just thought that was ridiculous. I thought that would be absolutely ridiculous if Brian Urlacher was not a first ballot Hall of Famer.
You had multiple NFL stars saying he's no doubt a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, Aaron Rodgers praises the guy over and over. He said he was his favorite football player and his favorite person to play against. I mean, that right there should tell you how good he is.
I would say so, but and apparently the voters ultimately agreed with that. But there was a lot of national media that were like, well, we don't think so. And luckily, whoever votes made the right choice. Mike made the right decision.
Yeah, again, you just look at the pure stuff he did, and it'll tell you right there how great of a player he was. Just go back and watch that whole performance he had against the Arizona Cardinals in that amazing comeback win in 06. I mean, that right there was probably one of the best individual performances by a linebacker in NFL history.
Oh, I mean, that second half of that game was, I think I've told the story before, is I was so disgusted because I lived in Philadelphia at the time and the Bears were doing so well. And then they just stunk it up in the first half of that game. And I was getting all kinds of messages from people, that are Eagle fans that were bad mouthing the Bears. And I just got so fed up. I went to bed and I woke up in the morning and I was like, I wonder what that score is going to be. And they won. I'm like, what? And I had recorded it. So I, before I went to work, I sat down and watched it and I was like, oh my God. It was like Brian Urlacher and Devin Hester basically put on superhero capes for that second half.
Oh yeah. I mean, they won the game. Those two won the game.
And then the best post-game speech ever happened.
I really wish he was still alive for the induction of Brian Urlacher, because I bet you there would have been something done with that. I really do.
Oh, there had to. There should have been. I mean, if he was still with us, that would have been the ultimate. I think Denny Green was a good enough sport that he would have done something. And
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The guy was a class act.
But I mean, I'm glad that they put Urlacher in the first ballot, and I was confident that he should have been, but to be, to see the other side that they may not have is they didn't put Terrell Owens in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. And
Yeah.
Terrell Owens, I've been watching football for a long time. Terrell Owens is the best wide receiver I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen Steve Largent. I've seen Jerry Rice. I've seen Randy Moss. I've seen Chris Carter. Terrell Owens is the best wide receiver I've ever seen play. And he was a total basket case and a bad teammate. But you know what is, for as long as you could keep him from self-destructing, he made your team infinitely better by being on it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the guy's talent was, you couldn't measure that type of talent. But yeah, sometimes your reputation as a person can affect the way you get votes. But if you just went on talent alone, I don't think there's many people who would disagree with what you said there.
Yeah, he was just so astronomically good. And if you could put him on some sort of medication to make him, not go off the rails, and you could put him on a Patriots team with a Tom Brady, that team would won 10 Super Bowls in a row.
Oh, of course.
Because they would average 40 points a game.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Think about Brian Urlacher, too, when it comes to teams. He even mentioned this. He played on a lot of bad teams. Even though he played on a number of good ones, he played on a lot of bad ones. Imagine the more attention he would have gotten. Yeah, he was in Chicago. Yeah, he was getting attention because he was in Chicago. But imagine if the Bears were good for a huge chunk of the time he was here and consistently making playoffs and maybe even making multiple Super Bowls. Just imagine how much more hyped he would have been.
I mean, he was on a lot of bad teams. He wasn't on a lot of bad defenses.
Oh, no, not at all. But I mean, just as a whole, there were a lot of teams that did not not succeed.
But that's part of the mystique of Brian Urlacher is that he was on some bad teams, but the defenses were real good. And it was because we had quarterbacks that, you forget about, that you forget existed, because the Bears offense was terrible. Epically terrible.
I mean, it's a shame.
When the two best quarterbacks, for most of his career are Kyle Orton and Rex Grossman, that tells you something.
Yeah, I mean, when he came in, 2000? Who was their quarterback in 2000? I don't even remember.
2000.
It wasn't... Because I got to think about this. It wasn't, let's see. I mean, this goes to show right here, we can't remember it off the top of our head. So, I mean, it was Cade McNown. I was thinking that it wasn't Cade McNown, but yeah, it was Cade McNown. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Cade McNown. You know what's really funny? You brought up Kyle Orton. I was thinking about Kyle Orton the other day, and I'm thinking, you could go around and ask most Bears fans, and they wouldn't have anything overly bad to say about Kyle Orton. He wasn't fantastic, but he wasn't terrible.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
He was just a guy. He wasn't going to take you to a Super Bowl. And here's in the year 2000, here are the quarterbacks that started games for the Bears. Cade McNown, Shane Matthews, Jim Miller. The next year, Jim Miller, Shane Matthews. The next year, Jim Miller, Chris Chandler, Henry Burris. The next year, Cordell Stewart, Chris Chandler, Rex Grossman. The next year, Craig Krenzel, Chad Hutchinson, Jonathan Quinn, Rex Grossman. The next year, Kyle Orton, Rex Grossman. The next year, Rex Grossman. The next year, Rex Grossman, Brian Greasy, Kyle Orton.
Brian Greasy.
The next year, Kyle Orton, Rex Grossman. Then Jay Cutler. Then Jay Cutler, Todd Collins. Then Jay Cutler, Caleb Haney, Josh McNown. Then Jay Cutler, Jason Campbell.
Oh, I remember Jason Campbell. I actually kind of liked him as a backup, and then he came here, and it was barf.
So those are the quarterbacks that Brian Urlacher played with.
Oh, my God. Todd Collins. I'll never forget the one game he started in that 2010 season, but like the defense was so good that his awfulness didn't really affect it. And then when he came into the NFC Championship game, oh.
You probably are too young to remember Craig Krenzel. He's from Ohio State. He was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the name, but I don't remember watching him.
Oh, Craig Krenzel.
I got to look up his stats now.
Yeah.
If I want to. Oh, okay. So he's only had 1 year, 718 yards, 3 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a approximate value rating of a 1.
Yeah, he was bad. He was real bad. And I think he was their third string quarterback, and they started playing him. It was a rookie third string quarterback.
When I think of terrible Bears quarterbacks, honestly, the first one I think about, I mean, there's so many to choose from, but honestly, Cade McNown is always the first one that comes to my mind.
Not Steve Stenstrom or Rick Meyer.
Nah, Cade McNown, because from what I remember, I was very young. He was just a total ass. That's what I remember.
He was bad. Oh, man.
Well, hopefully our current quarterback can be better than these guys.
Yeah. But I have one question for you before we get into the actual game.
Yes.
Who will be the next Chicago Bear inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
Well, this is going to be the controversial one, but honestly, because of his achievements at the particular area of the game, I'm going to say Devin Hester.
I mean, that's a possibility. I think it's possible, but man,
I could see Peanut Tillman maybe.
Peanut Tillman won't ever make it. He was great, and I loved him.
Don't think so.
Same with Lance Briggs. He won't make it either.
Nah, he was good, but not good enough.
I think it might be Mongo McMichael.
Man, I didn't think of that.
I think he's going to be one of those guys that years later they look back and they add him. He's deserving. He's really deserving. And then after that, I think Devin Hester goes. I think he does.
As a punt returner, yeah. I mean, he's the all-time great, and honestly, fans around the league loved watching him.
Yeah, I mean, go back and watch the opening kickoff of the Super Bowl, the Bears versus the Colts, and just before he even catches the ball, just go back and watch how many camera flashes you see go off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could just remember any game, whether it was at Soldier Field or on the road. Every time the ball was kicked in his direction, you felt the buzz of the stadium start to rise. I mean, it's like, and then as soon as he caught it, it would get even higher. And as soon as he started running, it would get even higher. And every yard he got, you just had this gradual buzz just go up and up and up. And it was incredible. And again, even on the road, whether it was the Bears fans on the road or the home fans, every time you saw the ball kicked in his direction, everyone had their eyes glued to the field.
Yeah, he was electrifying. He was absolutely electrifying.
The way he would weave through people, that was the thing that got me. You'd have what looks like a giant wall of defenders coming in to try to tackle him. He would just weave right through them. Before they even have a chance to get down and tackle, he'd zoom right by them. Effortlessly. It looked like there was no effort being put into it.
I just want to go back and watch all of his touchdown returns, because it was amazing.
So is there one outside the Super Bowl that stands out to you, a particular return that stands out to you from Devin Hester?
Yes. It'll be the missed field goal return for a touchdown.
Oh, against the Giants. Yeah, that was a thing of beauty, because frankly, it takes balls to do that. But he did it, and he did it easily.
He caught it, and then he took like 5 walking steps and then just took off and was gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, was it beautiful.
Exactly. He kind of faked him out.
Yeah. And just I blanked on this, is Julius Peppers will be a Hall of Famer, but he will not go in as a Chicago Bear.
No.
But he will go into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really, he was a Bear, but I don't really count him as like, oh, the next Bear to go in to the Hall of Fame. You know, I consider him a Panther at the end.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Packer, and I was like, don't you dare. Don't you dare.
No, when you say Julius Peppers and Packers, it makes me cringe for multiple reasons. And you probably have an idea what those multiple reasons are.
I hated that he played for the Packers.
Well, and the fact that his last play as a Bear was missing a division-winning sack by like 5 inches.
So let's talk about this game. There's not a lot to talk about. It was not a single starter that played in that game. But I have a few things I wanted to talk about. The first one is, do you understand this helmet rule? Because I thought I did until I watched this game, and then I was more confused than I am about what's a catch.
You know what? I don't think anybody really understands it, and I think it's even more arbitrary than a catch. I think we're going to have a lot of problem with this. A lot of problems.
I just don't understand how somebody on the field in the heat of the moment is going to be the one that makes that call and applies it fairly. Especially when the league had so many of their veteran and most highly rated referees retire. So you've got the most inexperienced staff you've had in a long time, and you implement this new vague rule. And when you read the rule, if you read the entire rule, it is vaguely written.
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to interpret it in a specific and uniformly applied way?
And are they going to be fair about it, or is it going to be lopsided? You know what I mean? Some teams are going to get away with it, others aren't. And frankly, I'm a little worried about it when it comes to the Bears, because think about it. The Bears, they're building up this defense. It's already pretty good. They're going to be playing pretty aggressively. I could see the Bears being tagged a lot for that rule.
I agree, and it's frustrating. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's really frustrating, and I hope they get the kinks out of it. And I hope that the NFL sits down after the games with the referees and was like, here's where you applied it correctly. Here's where you applied it incorrectly. And we use the preseason to work out the kinks with the referees, because they need this work just as much as the players do.
I could see it now. The Bears are in a tight game with the Packers. and then they get that penalty called on them, and then it's going to cost them the game. Like, I could see it now.
And you can't. I don't think you can replay it. I don't think it's challengeable.
No, that would make it an even bigger mess, frankly.
It's. I mean, I get they're trying to preserve the health of players. I just think this is the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, it's just, the rule is going to be very confusing, and if they work out any kinks, it's not going to be in one game. That's for certain. It's going to take some time.
But back to the actual Hall of Fame game, there was 2 players that I was disappointed I didn't see play in the game. I would say guess, but that's a real guessing game. But the 2 players are Kevin White and Anthony Miller. And I thought,
I would have liked to have seen Kevin White.
Yeah, both of those guys are. One is, both of them are unproven with a lot of talent. One needs to prove he's healthy, and the other one is been showing a lot in training camp. It would have been nice to see both of them at least go out for a series or 2, just so we can get a glimpse of them, other than just training camp. So, I thought that both of them could have, really gained experience from the playing time, because one I think you're going to rely on a lot, and the other one is a guy who you drafted very high and has been injured, so he needs the playing time because he doesn't have it.
Yeah, the thing with Kevin White was I wanted to see him play, but fear the injury. I said if he does play, I only want to see him do like 1 or 2 drives. That's it.
That's all I want to see too. I just want to see him route run, maybe catch a pass or 2. That's all I want to see.
Yeah. Who was like the quote unquote most regular guy we saw in the game? Benny Cunningham?
Maybe.
That's all I could really think of right now.
I'm trying to think of who played on the offensive line, but it was none of the regulars. So
no, it wasn't.
Yeah, might have been Benny Cunningham.
Yeah.
But one guy who took full advantage of the playing time was Javon Wims, the 7th round wide receiver draft pick. Looked good.
Yeah, and a lot of people were talking about that too. We were kind of looking for things to look positively in that game, even though there wasn't a lot, considering there wasn't many notable names. But yeah, absolutely.
And I get you're playing against a bunch of guys who are going to be bottom of the roster guys if they make it, but probably will not make a final roster. But he looked really good doing it. And you would, if you're a starting player, you expect to look really good against those kind of players. And he did. He looked good. And I think that's important because this is a crowded wide receiver field for the Bears. And they're probably only going to keep 6. So you've got your two big money signings. You've got Miller, who you drafted high. And if Kevin White is healthy, and then the last 2 are probably going to be, you're looking at guys that are going to be special teamers. So you've really got to prove yourself if you're going to make this team.
Yeah, and we can actually say that there's a crowded wide receiver core for once. How often do we say that?
Not very often. Wide receivers, Anthony Miller, Taylor Gabriel, Josh Bellamy, Fowler, Robinson, White, Wims, Tanner Gentry. There's a lot of guys, and you're only keeping 6. So yeah, I think that was huge for him to go forward and make the best of that opportunity. Because odds are at least one of your wide receivers is going to go down, and take advantage of that spot while you got it and show them that you deserve the playing time when it's time for next man up.
What kind of stunk to see in that game was honestly Fowler did not look good at all. He dropped several passes that should have been caught.
Yeah, but honestly, I didn't really expect him to do anything. So
Well, I didn't either. It was just something that caught my eye.
yeah. I mean, if you look at the initial depth chart for wide receiver 2 position, he was fourth. He was fourth in wide receiver 2. So
Yeah.
that's on the outside looking in, and didn't do himself any favors. And Javon Wims was ahead of him already and went out there and looked good. So uphill battle for Fowler, but it is what it is. The pass rush, and again, I get this was against a second unit and a third unit offensive line, but the Bears got productive pass rush from myriad of guys.
Yeah, they did. And pass rush is obviously the one thing that we're looking at as one of the bigger weaknesses on this team. But yeah, I mean, I saw it and I liked it. But again, considering who the competition was, I'm like, well, should I really get overexcited or not really?
No, I'm not overly excited. And I don't think the answer is, like, oh, we've got the next coming of Julia Peppers here. But it was to see guys actually stand out. Because if you think about it, is all right, they're playing against third stringers, but these aren't your first stringers either. And if your guys are winning the majority of the battles, and they're supposed to be basically equivalent, is your second string should be roughly around their second string, and their third string should be against your third string, based on the playing time, etc. And if your guys are winning most of the battles, that's really good. And especially since none of those guys are going to be your first string guys, to see like an Isaiah Irving and Kylie Fitz, going in there and getting the pass rush when they come in as rotational guys and depth guys, then, you're like, oh, well, I at least have some confidence that they can get to the quarterback.
Yeah, no, that's a fine way to put it.
I don't know how much faith I would have if they were my top options, but as your rotational guys, all right, they're intriguing me. I thought we had nada, and I didn't know what we were going to get with those guys, and I had no expectations, and they piqued my interest.
Well, hopefully they could keep doing that throughout the preseason, because if they could show that more consistently, then you could say, hey, maybe the depth we have is semi-decent.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Is it looks like the depth is improving. So you're improving your top line talent and you're improving your depth. And that is how you improve and cause a winning football team.
Yeah, there you go.
But training camp too is the practices. Man, every day you are seeing phenomenal plays from wide receivers. Javon Wims had a big game. Anthony Miller is making huge plays. Kevin White's making huge plays. And against the Bears' top secondary players, it's not against scrubs, and they're making these phenomenal deep ball plays. That's got me excited. That has me excited.
I saw a video today of Anthony Miller, and I think Prince Amukamara was on him, and he had a pass thrown to him that was a little underthrown, but with Amukamara on him, he was still able to kind of adjust and make the catch and then keep going. So little things like that make you optimistic.
Yeah. Because we know that Gabriel and Robinson are probably going to be your top two options. And when your second string guys are coming in and looking good and looking real good against your starting cornerbacks, that's reason to take notice. Part of it is you've got better talent, but part of it is you have a better offensive mind who's going to you can have the best wide receivers in football, But if you have a stagnant, stale offense, then guess what? Those guys aren't going to look as good. But if you've got a dynamic offense with a good play caller, is you are going to help your guys look better. And if they're already talented guys to begin with, then there you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right now, what the Bears have on paper is a wide receiver core that not only is tenfold improved from last year, but it could allow for the development of Mitch Trubisky because, he doesn't have to put it exactly into their hands like last year. I mean, he has a little more room to kind of feel for himself because these guys could go out and make difficult catches. You didn't get that last year at all.
No, and actually you're seeing Mitch Trubisky look pretty darn good. There was a lot of talk on the first, week, 2 weeks of training camp about people like, oh, Mitch Trubisky not looking so good. But you watch the practices now, and it's a night and day difference. And you even talked to him, and he said, the game is slowing down. And that is the phrase you want to hear from your quarterback.
Yes.
Is the game has slowed down. You never, ever, ever, ever heard that from Jay Cutler.
No, you never did. Or anyone I could think of on the Bears.
You are hearing second-year quarterback Mitchell Trubisky say the game is slowing down. And that is always the phrase people use when they take big leaps, because it's not that the speed per se, it is that, I mean, if you think about it, it is if you are inexperienced and you're playing against, if you're doing something against somebody that's very experienced, you're so mesmerized by the things that they're doing that you get lost in what you're doing. And when you become experienced and good at things, you focus on what you're doing and not so much what the other person's doing. And everything is it's not so much the speed, it's not overwhelming. It's not a bigger situation than you are. You're able to process through things, and you're thinking, and what you're doing mentally is catching up to where the game speed is. And eventually you get to a point, hopefully, where a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers, where you're so much faster than the game, not your speed per se, but your mental processing of what's happening is faster than what this game speed is. And it's like you're in the Matrix, and you're doing things that, just defy logic because you're processing faster than what the game is.
And think about last year when Trubisky was throwing just a little bit per game and it was run. You're running the ball so much, and then all of a sudden you have to throw finally, and then everything is like, whoa. You know what I mean? Now with a more balanced offense, it's you just said it right there. It's showing already that he's going to be able to pick up on things more. He's got more talent around him. He's got the coaching around him. It's just going to make such a big difference.
And just the experience of it is, honestly, is you when you're at another level. I mean, when you're playing at North Carolina versus you're playing in the NFL, the level of talent is vastly different. So when you're throwing to a wide receiver who's covered in college, that window you can throw it and hit your mark and beat your guy. But in the NFL, that cornerback has a second gear and can undercut it and intercept it. So it's a lot of feeling out. What are my capabilities versus that cornerback's capabilities? And that's not a knowledge you just have. Even when you have a really good quarterback, like if you look back, this is before your time, but Peyton Manning's rookie season, he threw so many interceptions, and it took time for him to feel out, all right, because he doesn't have a cannon arm. All right, what am I able to throw where versus what is this cornerback showing me he can do? What do I know he can do that he's not trying to show me? And be able to beat him with your throws. And Peyton Manning ended up doing things pre-snap to get his guys into position rather than beating him with his arm. And so it was a thinking process that helped him beat it. But he also was able to go, all right, let me look back at some of the throws I made, and I can't make that throw anymore. But here's what I can do to beat that guy. And that just comes with experience. And hopefully Mitch Trubisky, with a year under his belt, plus a phenomenal offensive grouping of coaches, will also help him improve on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this year is the opportunity, like I said before, where he's really, I know this sounds silly and corny, but he's truly a rookie this year because he gets the chance to do what he's supposed to do. Last year, he was handcuffed so much that it's almost like he didn't get nearly the experience he needed him to get. I mean, do you think that's a fair assessment? Because I do.
Fair and not fair at the same time. Like, fair, I get it. He had a year where he was with a lame duck coach that didn't want to play him to begin with, and basically handcuffed him because it was a bad offensive system with a guy that shouldn't be an offensive coordinator in the NFL and a head coach that's notoriously poor offensive minded. And he was a guy coming out of college that was a lot of high upside, but was going to be fairly raw, and you put him in a tough spot. So I see the point of saying he's sort of a rookie-ish, but he did get that valuable playing time. So it's a hard road. It's kind of like when a guy loses half the season to injury, like Watts, or what the guy from the Texans.
Watson.
Yeah. Watson is, he's going to come into this year. Is he like a second year guy, or is he kind of like a rookie? Because what, he played like 5 games and blew his knee out. So
yeah, he at least got to throw the ball and had things to throw to, but yeah, he didn't play that many games.
So there's a lot of growing pains he's going to have this year because he didn't have those growing pains last year. Mitch Trubisky at least got a lot of those growing pains out of the way, but that's his playing time. But he's going to have new growing pains because of a new offensive system that takes a lot more of him reading and recognizing than the previous one.
Right.
But there's one more thing I wanted to bring up about the Bears. And we really took the Bears to the woodshed last week about the Roquan Smith situation.
Yes, we did.
And I mean, to be fair, we don't know the timeline of when it could have been a situation where Bears said no to the clause about not taking his money away for a helmet suspension. And maybe they flip-flopped on that. And then the agents for Roquan Smith were like, well, now we're going to up it and we want, no suspension getting taking money away. We don't know the timeline of what happened. So I'm not going to backtrack on what I said about the Bears, but based on the new information, now it's shame on Roquan Smith's people. Is you need your player in there to learn the system. You got to get him in there playing. And now you are asking, you're trying to take a fight that should be fought with the collective bargaining agreement with the Players Association in the league. And you're trying to fight it out as a free agent type situation, a contract issue with a guy that's never played a snap in the NFL. That is taking advantage of Roquan Smith. And I don't know what he knows, what he's complicit in, what he's backed from his agents, but shame on that camp at this point. Is the Bears conceded that language. The money is already a moot point because it's a slotted situation. Get your guy in camp. And if this is going to be a long holdout, which I'm hearing rumors might be a holdout until the 11th hour, then it's it's going to be bad news for him. And fans are going to turn on Roquan Smith. You're already starting to see it.
I know. It's just it's a sucky situation. Everything else looks so good right now for the Bears as a whole, but this whole thing, it's like we can't have just a perfectly nice camp. There's got to be something. But I'm of the mentality that as soon as he signs, as soon as he's with the team playing, I'm just going to forget it happened. But until then, I'm going to sit here with my arms crossed, tapping my foot, wondering when the heck this is going to all materialize.
Yeah, kind of like Shaun of the Dead. I just want to go sit at the Winchester, have a pint, and wait for this all to blow over.
Exactly. Right on.
And honestly, I started to think maybe the agents are just stalling because they don't want him participating in that Hall of Fame game, because I know there's a lot of agents, a lot of players that are anti that game because they're already anti how many preseason games they play, but this is an extra one. So this is a 5th preseason game.
Right.
And I was like, maybe his camp is stalling because they don't want him involved in that. And it's hard to say after he signs, well, our player doesn't want to play in it. It's up to the team at that point. And based on what the Bears played, they weren't going to play him anyway. But I was like, maybe it's their assurance that they'll sign too late for him to play. But now we're at the point where it's too late for him to play in the second game.
Right.
And that, I mean, if he would have signed immediately after the game was Thursday, if he would have signed Friday, then, he could have probably played this next preseason game. But now we're at the point, it's too late. And you don't want him to not play any preseason games. That's not good for anybody.
No, it's not. That's something that I really, really hope could be avoided. I want to see him in at least one preseason game. At least one.
Yeah, and I would love to have him have a lot of practices under his belt because he's got to learn a defense. He's got to learn an NFL defense, and not just a vanilla defense. He's got to learn a Vic Fangio defense.
Exactly. I mean, it's not like you could just plug him in and be like, oh, okay, do your thing. He's a rookie. He's never played in the NFL before. This is a whole different ballgame.
So, I mean, I can guarantee that Roquan Smith is not listening to this podcast, but if he is, tell your people to get you into camp.
We want you, man. We want you here.
We want you, and it's silly at this point. You're not going to get it because honestly, the league colludes, and every team in the league is going to tell the Bears, absolutely do not sign that, give up this concession where we won't take money away if you get suspended for something off the field. The rest of the league is going to be, do not do that because that's setting a bad precedent. Right. And it's never going to happen for your contract, Roquan Smith. I'm not saying never, ever, but not with your contract. So just give it up. Tell the agent that works for you that, all right, you know what? This is dumb. I concede. I will gladly take the language where I can't be to have money taken away if I get suspended for something on the field. And I already take my money, get a paycheck, get in there and learn the system, and enough of the shenanigans.
Exactly. Yeah. I just want him here. I want him on the field. I just want him on the field. I want to watch him play.
Yep, absolutely. I had a couple White Sox things. Not too many, but just a few. The White Sox first round pick, I believe it was the 4th overall pick, Nick Madrigal.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been reading about his start of his professional career?
Yeah, he's not striking out. I think he finally struck out the other day, but he had a great streak.
72 at-bats in the professional ranks without a strikeout.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
That's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he's not that high up in the minor leagues, but it doesn't matter.
Still.
Doesn't matter. That's really good. That's great for the White Sox, seeing their first round pick do stuff like that. I'm excited to see what he's going to do in a couple of years when he's playing in the pros.
Who's that Anderson guy? Bring up that Mardigal guy.
Yeah, bring up that Mark roll. Yeah, I like that guy.
That Tim Anderson, no good.
Tim Anderson, he can't hit his way out of a wet paper bag. Oh, I can't.
You know, speaking of Tim Anderson, he's one I cannot grasp. There are times he looks phenomenal. And then there are times where it looks like he shouldn't even be in Double-A ball. There's just the talent is there. I'm waiting for the consistency to come around with that guy.
I don't know if you'll ever see it. I bet he has a season probably next year or the year after where he has just an absolute monster season and you're going to be like, oh, he finally put it together. And then he's going to regress again. I just don't think he's the long-term solution, especially considering look at all of the talent you have in the minor leagues that you're expecting much more from. And by the time those guys come up, Tim Anderson, it's time for sink or swim.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If Tim Anderson doesn't work out, you have plenty of other options for the future that can make you relax a little bit about that. It's not like he makes or breaks everything right now.
He's like the White Sox version of Starlin Castro. You're like, all right, he flashes some good stuff. And you're like, I think he can be a superstar. But then you're just like, man, he just can't put it all together.
Yeah, it's like, take a little bit of average away from Castro and put it into some more home run hitting. That's basically Tim Anderson. Because neither walk a lot. Fielding wise, they have some huge hits and misses. So yeah, I mean, I see a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah, and the Cubs, before they got good, moved on from Starlin Castro.
Yeah, they had the one 2015 with him, but by the time 2015 came around, you had Addison Russell in the pipeline, you were bringing up Javier Baez, and then you went out and got Ben Zobrist, which I do 10 times out of 10. So there you go.
One of the other things I want to talk about the White Sox is we had another really good outing from Carlos Rodon versus Tampa Bay. He walked a lot of guys, considering I think he had 5 walks, but no earned runs and looked good out there. I think we're starting to see what Carlos Rodon can do when he's healthy.
Yeah, I think you're seeing arguably, I mean, I don't even think it's arguable. I think it's solidified facts, the best baseball you're seeing from Carlos Rodon that we've ever seen in this stretch.
I mean, if you start to see, if Carlos Rodon is the Carlos Rodon you expect him to be, and the next topic I wanted to talk about rolls right into it is Lucas Giolito had another good start versus Tampa Bay. So if Giolito looks good and he's on your starting roster, you got Carlos Rodon, then you got Kopech as your next guy in the pipeline, Dylan Cease, and you've got Reynaldo Lopez, and you've got more pitchers in your pipeline. That is a hell of a rotation that's made up all of guys on entry-level contracts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that goes to show right now where you are in this rebuild.
Yeah. And unlike the Mets, when they had this, army of young pitchers that made no money, is the White Sox have batters too. You've got Eloy, who's arguably the best hitter in the minor leagues, and he's ready to burst to join this team.
And by the time we do our next show, he's going to be up. That's what it sounds like.
I think he needs to be. I think he needs to be.
Yeah.
I don't know what else. He's going to get all the at bats that he needs in the majors, and they don't have to worry about if he struggles or to work through things because this team the record is not good. They're not going anywhere, so might as well let him get all these in there. It's like an extended spring training.
The only counter thing I'm hearing about it is, oh well, the whole contract thing, but I don't really know enough about how his contract is structured, so I see no reason from a baseball standpoint to not bring him up.
Yeah, I mean it's they'll lose a year of team control, but he's going to be arbitration eligible, and if he's everything you think he's going to be making a butt ton of money by the end of that arbitration contract anyway. It's not like he's going to be making $500,000 a year, and you're probably, if he's truly what you expect him to be, you're going to lock him up to an extension before that anyway.
Right. I mean, so I say just bring him up. He's got nothing left to prove.
Nada. Absolutely nada. But yeah, quickly going back to Giolito, I'm really glad he's starting to figure things out. He's had a couple good starts here in the last few weeks. And, I guess he was able to work through those struggles without having to go down. So kudos to Rick Hahn for knowing more about baseball than me.
I mean, a few months ago we were saying, is this guy even cut out for this? But now you're seeing kind of what you've been hoping to see. There's a lot of movement on the pitches, and you're starting to see it get over the plate a little more, and you're seeing results.
So, I mean, the future keeps looking brighter and brighter for the White Sox. And, kudos out there to you Southside fans for, dealing with this long stretch of losing, because it's coming to a close real soon. And it is going to be a massive swing to the other way, because you've got so much talent in the minor leagues.
It's going to be a massive swing, I think, within a few months. The end of the year, even though they're not going to make the postseason, you're going to see them play winning baseball if they bring up a lot of these guys. You just wonder, are the White Sox going to go after a big money pitcher in this offseason to kind of, I mean, if they go after a big money pitcher and another veteran bat, they could make the turnaround for next season, because you expect Kopech is going to be on the roster. Rodon, Giolito, Lopez. I don't think Cease will be there yet, but Eloy will be up, and as a hitter. So you're going to have guys up there, and if you bolster them with some veterans until the last batch of guys start coming up, you make that turn real quick. You turn 2014 into 2015. Exactly. I mean, that's when you have this much young talent, that's how quickly it could turn around. And I know baseball rebuilds could take a long time because you have to go through a system and development, but when they come up at all around the right time, it makes a huge difference with the snap of a finger.
And you're about to see that. But I think I want to wrap this up with some Cub talk.
Yeah, and I have a few bones to pick, I'll be honest with you, with this team.
This was a really disappointing series with the San Diego Padres, to say the least.
Extremely disappointing.
And, to go along with it, it wasn't just like, a few bad games. You're seeing some concerning things too. Rizzo losing his cool. And granted, that was totally not a strike.
That was warranted.
He was right, but you don't like to see your cool-headed team leader lose his cool like that. And you really don't like to see the regression of John Lester and Randy Rosario.
Well, the peripherals for John Lester were not all that great for a while. Unfortunately, this is not that surprising, but it still doesn't make it any less frustrating, because you saw this past weekend the San Diego Padres light you up twice. And even in the games they didn't win, They were getting on base. They were spraying the ball. San Diego has the worst offense in the league. The worst. And yesterday, they were crushing you. They were crushing John Lester. The Padres. And look, I get they still have the best record in the NL. I get that. I'm going to get the whole, well, you're ungrateful in this golden age. No, I don't want to sound that way. But you're in a tight division race. A tight. No matter what your record is compared to everyone else, you are only one game ahead of the Brewers. And other teams are starting to creep up on you.
The Padres are so filled with nobodies. Is when I was in San Diego the other week, I was asked to be on a sports radio show for a brief thing. And they were asking me questions related to San Diego Comic-Con and superheroes and the Padres players. And I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know who the hell's on the team currently. I'm going to talk about past Padres. It's like, because that is a team of nobodies. And I'm like, I don't want to pretend I know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, their best position player is probably Will Myers. Is Will Myers. I don't think there's any debate there.
It's a bad team. And the Cubs, even the wins they got, were not good wins.
I rarely complain about wins, so I won't say too much about that. But, I mean, yeah, they put a scare into the Cubs in the ninth inning, that one game, and then, that other game, they're up 5-0, didn't score any more after that, and then the Padres kind of chipped away. That was a game where it was weird, because Kyle Hendricks looked a lot better. Unfortunately, a bad error by him kind of opened up the floodgates, and one of the home runs he gave up was completely wind-aided, so I know the conditions were not great to pitch in. I do understand that, but it was still kind of frustrating. If you look at the pitching over that weekend, by far the best one in terms of the starters was Quintana, because not only did he throw strikes, didn't walk anybody, and only gave up one run. And that one home run he gave up, I saw it, wasn't a bad pitch. Guy just went out and got it. So it was just a good piece of hitting there. But, Mike Montgomery, I think he missed one bat that whole start. I think I read that, one bat. And, Hendricks, things kind of fell apart late, but he still looked a lot better than other starts. And then John Lester did not look good at all. So you got to give Quintana some credit there.
I want to read you some stats. Since the trade that brought Jose Quintana to the Cubs, I want to compare his numbers from that date to John Lester.
All right.
So ERA, since the trade that brought Quintana to the Cubs, Quintana's ERA is 3.95, Lester's is 3.68. Quintana's FIP is 4.04, Lester's is 4.52, and xFIP, Quintana's is 3.9 and Lester's is 4.45. One is a guy that we refer to as an unquestionable ace. The other one, a lot of fans are saying, is a terrible trade and a bust for the Cubs.
That's interesting. That really is.
I mean, you haven't seen the unadulterated ace stuff of Quintana on a consistent basis that he has, but he's been a pretty good pitcher. It just people are mad about what they had to give up to get him, and they blow it up worse when he's had some bad starts.
Well, and here's the thing. You look back at his past 17 starts, so much of his good was blown up in the eyes of many fans by that one terrible start in St. Louis. And that one terrible start was after he threw 121 pitches and his arm was feeling a little bit tired. So if you take that start away, he's been probably one of the most consistent pitchers on the team. He had just one terrible start. And then the other two god-awful starts came against Atlanta. There has been a lot more good than bad. It's just that the little bit of bad has been so bad, it's ballooned everything up.
And I think people are just mad because you gave up Eloy Jimenez.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, where would Eloy play? You would have to. I get that he is looking phenomenal, but you would have to move somebody to make room for him. He's roadblocked.
Yeah, I mean,
you've got 4 young players that are playing out there right now, regularly.
Yeah,
and, I mean, you look at Hayward's not old. Hayward's in the early prime of his career.
He's younger than Rizzo. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah. You've got Happ, who's young. You've got Schwarber, who's young. And who am I forgetting?
Almora.
Almora is young. You've got 4 young guys out there that are, that you got to make room for Eloy if you still had him. And, if you still had Eloy, who was the other starting pitcher you have?
Look, when the trade was made last year, Quintana was the perfect fit for the Cubs. You saw his numbers throughout the years with the White Sox, and you saw what he did just consistently and the cost control. So, I mean, it was ideal. It was the perfect trade.
And Eloy wasn't the Eloy that he is right now. You had high hopes, but
yeah, exactly.
But he was a really young guy that he hadn't shown really anything yet to what he's showing now. So it was, you were giving up a high reward or high ceiling, but unproven young player. And you were getting back a proven pitcher that was under team control for a really good contract.
Yeah, exactly. It was the perfect ideal trade at the time.
And I guarantee you, if you asked Theo about it, he wouldn't go back and not make that trade if he could. He would make that trade.
Of course he would. Of course he would.
So I don't know why Cubs fans are so upset about it still, because it was the right trade, and a good trade is one where both sides give up a lot, but get a lot. And the Cubs had to give up. You can't just rob everybody and give up nobody to get everybody. And you'll read in baseball forums where they're like, oh, they should trade this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy for the superstar. Why would the other team want 8 mediocre to sub-mediocre players when they could have a superstar? Like, you've got to give somebody up. It's going to be painful in a trade. If you're trading to get somebody very, very talented, it's going to hurt you too. You're going to feel it. So the Cubs definitely feel losing Eloy Jimenez, but they gained a really good, a number 2, number 3 starting pitcher for how many years of control for under $10 million a year.
I mean, that's why you had to give up so much. It wasn't just the quality, it was the control. Contracts mean everything now.
Yep. And the Cubs are losing already to the Royals.
I know.
What the hell?
Alcides Escobar, who's batting 200, just hit a bullet for an RBI single. This starting pitching is really, really starting to concern me. They can't miss bats. They're walking guys. They are pitching many high counts, resulting in a lot of pitches. Full counts, I mean, a lot of full counts.
Yeah, because you've got this what should be a really, really potential sweeping series against the Kansas City Royals because they're not a good team. But then
you have to beat these guys. There's no excuse.
You have to, especially considering after this You have a 3-game stretch with the Washington Nationals. You've got a 2-game stretch with the Brewers. And then you've got a 4-game stretch with the Pirates.
You have to take advantage here. I just look. I know. I keep preaching, stay calm, yada yada yada. But so far, the second half has not been good at all. It's been the definition of mediocre. And you know what? If the Cubs were up by a lot and it was just one kind of bad stretch, you understand it more. But this is a situation where you can't afford that. They can't afford to lose much because the Brewers are not going away. So you got to start winning consistently.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're absolutely right. You've got to you can't rely on other teams losing for you to stay in first. Like, I mean, I get that the Brewers have been losing as well. For you to keep pace. I mean, the Rockies did us a favor, but you can't rely on that. You've got to win, because if the Cubs would have taken care of business, if they take care of business today, instead of just, maintaining against the Brewers, you gain a game. Or instead of losing yesterday, you gain a game.
Yeah, I don't know. This is probably the angriest you're going to hear me during the regular season of a Cubs season, but they need to get it together fully here. I mean, right now, they're facing a guy with a high ERA. I'm watching it right now, and the bats look flustered. They're not hitting him at all.
And you can't say, oh, well, no Bryant here, is because one guy shouldn't change the whole dynamic. And we'll talk about Brian in a minute, but this is a team that has a lot of high-paid superstar players. They need to step up and drive in runs.
I'm just waiting for this team to take off. I'm waiting for this team to just take off. They went into the All-Star break really hot, if you remember. And it looked like, okay, they went in hot, time for them to take complete control. And it hasn't happened.
It's fun. Who's pitching tonight for the Cubs?
Cole Hamels. Who looked really good against the Pirates. He struck out 9 guys. Yeah. The fastball was looking good. The changeup was looking good. Not looking quite as sharp tonight. He's giving up a lot of hard contact.
I was really hoping a change of scenery, because Cole Hamels, he's been around for a long time, but he's not that incredibly old.
No, he's not.
I mean, he's getting up there, but he's like 34. And, the tank shouldn't be empty at this point. And I was just hoping that maybe change of scenery reignited something in him. And then after that first start, I got my hopes up, and I'm like, give him a handful of starts before you get your hopes up. And I was like, nope, hopes are already up, and I hope they're not blown tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's only the top of the third right now, so we'll see how he progresses. Hamels hasn't looked awful. He's not missing bats like he was in the last start, or he was missing a few bats, but that was in a non-strikeout count. So,
thinking about Cole Hamels is I'm thinking about how many Cubs pitchers have at some point been part of the Texas Rangers team. Hamels, Hendricks, Edwards, Chavez, Darvish.
You had Justin Grimm.
There's so many of your pitchers that were on the Rangers.
It's one of those weird things.
I never even, I mean, I guess I knew all those players were, Rangers, but I guess I never put it all together, in one consecutive thought.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it either until the Cole Hamels trade. And then you kind of look back at it and you're like, oh, I see now. A lot of Rangers.
Yeah, I think that was what put it into perspective. Interesting. I mean, I never really thought about this. Um, Kyle Schwarber became the first Cub outfielder with back-to-back 20 home run seasons since Alfonso Soriano.
I thought that was interesting. And then when I thought about it, in a lot of the rebuilding years, they didn't have, outside Soriano, they didn't have really any power hitting outfielders. You had 1 year of Nate Schierholtz hitting 20 in 2013. David DeJesus wasn't a power hitter. Junior Lake you had out there for just a little while. Jason Hayward was never a power hitter. I mean, who else did you have out there? There were a lot of guys, but yeah, they weren't really power hitters. So interesting little stat.
Yeah, interesting stat. And you're right. When you break it down, it makes sense. But, you always associate at least corner outfielders with being power hitters. I think that's just a natural association. So when you see a team that has been so dominant for the last several years of the Cubs, to think that Schwarber was the first guy to do it since 2011, 2012, better part of a decade, man. But then when you do think about it, I mean, it makes sense as you're like, oh, well, there really wasn't anybody else.
Right.
It's not, it's not like we had, Bryce Harper and Mike Trout out there.
No, or Giancarlo Stanton.
What other topics did you have you want to talk about with the Cubs?
I mean, the one big credit I have to give the Cubs right now, I think by far the best part has been their bullpen as a whole, considering what it's done and how hard it's worked. I think you got to give a lot of credit to that bullpen.
Bullpen's been a lot of different guys too, and
yeah,
and they're still not 100% as far as injuries go. You just hope that they can be healthy come playoff time, because this is a over the last however many years, bullpens have become a huge part of doing well and going deep into the Major League Baseball postseason. And I think this is a special enough group where they can be a dangerous bullpen. And who would have thought that getting rid of Wade Davis would have helped your bullpen?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear at this point that the Cubs got the last of the effective years of Wade Davis last year. So at least we had that going for us, because the Rockies paid a lot of money for that.
And was it a 4-year deal?
I think it was 3 years.
Okay. Well, they've only got 2 more years left of it then.
Yeah, only 2.
They paid him a lot of money. Have you read any Rockies fans talk about him?
Oh yeah, I've read a few here or there on Twitter. A few.
They're brutal about it.
I mean, they're investing over like $100 million in that bullpen alone.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. But, I mean, maybe
bullpens are fickle, man.
Maybe
if you pay a lot for 1 year, oftentimes it's not going to translate the next year.
Well, that and your stadium sucks as far as being a pitcher's park.
Yeah, that too. But you look at Wade Davis, the splits are both bad.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying is, if you're the Rockies and you're not a big market team, and where does the big money go in baseball? And it's pitchers. So maybe it's cheaper to redesign your park and make it bigger. I mean, I know the altitude changes things, but make it a bigger park. Put a wall up there, because maybe then you can, have a better pitching performances there.
Hey, they tried to put up those hockey board like plexiglass things that raised the wall by like 7 feet. Not that it did much.
Wade Davis contract, 3-year, $52 million, including a 4th-year vesting option that could take the total value up to $66 million if he finishes 30 or more games in the 2020 season. So it could be a 4-year deal.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to really improve for them if they're going to make that money worth it.
Oof. The Cubs bailed on that at the perfect time.
Yeah, I mean, they essentially traded him for 1 year, and hey, he was pretty big in them winning the division and getting to the NLCS. I mean, if you remember in the postseason last year, he was the only one that could get outs in that bullpen.
Yeah, you don't beat the Nationals without him.
No, you don't. I mean, he gave up a few runs, but yeah, he was pretty big. I mean, he got what? 2 and a third innings of that last game 5. I know he pitched like at least 2 innings.
Yeah, it was. I was nervous as hell. I wish I would have had my Fitbit at the time because I probably paced 16 miles back and forth in my basement.
Oh yeah, I remember that night. That night was one of the longest and most grueling baseball nights ever. And look, we're never going to count Game 7 of the World Series because that's on a whole other world and universe of its own. But, outside that, that game was torture. It was absolute torture. And when the Cubs got a decent lead and then the Nationals started hitting everything off the bullpen, and, of course, it all came down to a 1-run game, but, thank God that 9th inning was 1-2-3. I thought for sure like the tying run was going to be on base that inning, but it never got on.
True. Are there any other topics you wanted to talk about, my friend?
There was one last question I wanted to bring to you. There are 3 key injuries right now on this team: Bryant, Darvish, and Morrow. Which one do you think is essential right now to have back right away? If you had to pick one.
Bryant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty obvious one. It's hard, though, because Bryant's your MVP. You also need your closer. Especially now, you need your closer. But yeah, I'd say Bryant 1 and then Morrow 2.
But, if Darvish could come back and pitch like we expect him to pitch, that would be a huge boost as well.
Oh, of course.
All 3 are just really key injuries, but it's impossible to vote against a team that's been struggling to consistently do offensive damage and lose, with no MVPs. You got to have the MVP on the field.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's how it is.
And he hasn't taken a swing since the second trip to the DEL. Hasn't taken a swing with a bat.
I'm getting more worried about him by the day. I really am.
I am really worried, and I would be shocked if I bet we see Darvish before we see Bryant.
It could be. It could very well be.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it is. On a high note, though, on a brighter note, Ben Zobrist just tripled. And can we talk about how good he's been this year, Ben Zobrist?
I think part of it is they don't need to play him so much. He can do what he can do what he needs to do on a infrequent basis. He's actually the sub and not a starter out of necessity. And
here's the other thing too. His wrist seems healthy. I mean, last year with that injured wrist, you could just tell how hard it was on him. And there were a lot of weak contact, where this year you're seeing more consistent contact. And every at-bat that guy has, it feels like he's in a 3-2 count.
Absolutely. And he just looks great. I think we thought he was washed up, but I don't think so. I think he's aging like a bottle of fine wine.
I'd say he's the best hitter on the team. If you're just talking about hitting in terms of average and on base and having good at-bats, he's the best hitter on the team.
I would agree with that.
I mean, Baez is the most productive, but Zobrist is the best hitter.
Yeah, and honestly, I love Baez. I love
too.
Baez. But if it's a clutch situation at the end of a game, who do you feel more confident up there having, Baez or Zobrist?
If it's a situation where somebody needs to get on, it's definitely Zobrist. I mean, how many rallies this year have we seen where Ben Zobrist kicked it off and just, whether it was a hit or a walk, like really good eye. Like, do you remember? I don't know if you saw it, but I saw the replay of it because I missed it initially. The comeback win against the Diamondbacks. Yeah, it was the Diamondbacks. Right before Bodie tied the game, Ben Zobrist had this long, grueling at-bat where he took a very close pitch for ball 4. I mean, his eye at the plate is so good. You see that. And can you really trust, or could you not trust a guy who had the single most important hit in franchise history? I mean, I think that should say enough.
And I don't remember if we talked about this or we talked about this or this was during this week. I don't remember. But I am pretty frustrated about that Addison Russell triple that he was called out at third.
Yeah, I was actually doing the Cubbies Crib live show during that, and I was on with a bunch of guys, and we all moaned and groaned after that.
I mean, maybe there's another angle we didn't see, but on everything we saw, he's safe.
Here's the other thing that they were talking about on ESPN 1000, and I found this interesting. Apparently, what they said, and I'd have to go back and look, I don't know, and I don't think I'll ever see it from the right angle, but when Russell was rounding the bases, he looked over for his coach to signal him, and he wasn't there. So he just went out and went. That's why it was so close.
Where was the coach?
I don't know, but he wasn't in his view.
Because he was there after. Because
he was there when he got there, but when he was initially running, he looked over and he didn't see him.
I mean,
I don't know if he was.
If you look
somewhere else, I don't know.
Russell hesitated and that must have been it because he hesitated when he rounded second for a split second, and honestly, he wasn't even late. If he was out, he came off the base, which is why you slide feet first.
Yeah. That was just a frustrating moment.
But I don't really have any other topics I want to talk about.
No, I don't either.
I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. This is why we do the show. Please make sure you hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the TuneIn app. Follow us on social media at ShyFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Share this podcast with one friend who likes any of the Chicago teams. And that's your challenge for this week. And thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van. And she looks like...
Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears!
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down,